If you don't get the reps in, learning doesn't happen, right? You have to do the thing. There's no substitute for doing the thing. There's particularly no AI substitute, unfortunately, for doing the thing. I cannot send an AI bot to the gym to lift weights for me. Like it can physically move the weight back and forth, but I don't get stronger at the end. No positive outcomes happen. The point was not literally to move the weight from A to B. The point is I'm exercising my muscle when I lift the weight up and down. And similar phenomenon happens in what we're doing in advisory firms.
Today on the Blueprint in FPA NexGen Podcast, we have the Michael Kitces. And this episode is full of his financial planning wisdom. It doesn't matter. If you are a new advisor, this episode has something for you. We hit AI, PE, and consolidation of firms, career progression, including partnership track. We threw fastballs at Michael Kitces, and he answered them. Let's dive in.
We're seeing AI be more prevalently used in the financial planning space. How do you believe AI is affecting entry-level positions, and how do you believe newer planners can leverage AI to accelerate their career?
I'm not in the camp that some are that will be one of those industries where all of the entry level jobs get obliterated by AI things. It really is fairly complex work. It has fairly high compliance regulatory burdens. Advice is not simple. Communication to clients is not simple. And AI is as grand as any technology evolution does. It always does the simplest things on the rung. And by the time we get to what associate advisors do as we're coming into a firm, it's still not quite that simple. So slightly more practically, tools still help. We all want to use tools collectively in the firm, right? If I look back 20 or 30 years ago, we got trained on financial calculators like HP 12C and 10B because you really could like pull that out in a client meeting to do a quick calculation. Like that was a thing. That doesn't happen anymore. We have financial planning software. It does this much better and deeper than a calculator was ever going to do. But the reality is that we went from, well, I was going to pull out a calculator in a meeting and do a quick calculation, to now I actually need an associate advisor to do the stuff in the planning software because we actually got so much deeper and more complex. We can go so much further with clients in planning software than we could with the calculator, that our services got deeper, our capabilities got deeper, and we all hired more associate advisors and paraplanners to help with the fact that, well, that more complex analysis actually still takes more time to do in the planning software. And so in the longer term, I would say the intermediate term, I think that's where we end up with this. So first of all, I mean, very practically, even if you've got an AI note taker coming into your meeting, because that's probably the most common scenario of like, why do I need an associate? I have a note taker. Like, okay, well, first and foremost, I can't just let the note taker like do its thing and run with abandon to the end, right? Someone's got to look at that and make sure the compliance notes actually get captured appropriately. Someone's got to look at the takeaways and make sure that the right action items are getting queued up. Someone needs to look at the email and make sure that is properly drafted and going out. Awesome. You know who can do that? An advisor. You know who's also great at doing that? An associate advisor who needs to learn and practice on all those things. And the advisor ends up delegating the same thing that they were delegating before. In essence, the AI note taker doesn't become a piece of software for the advisor, it becomes a piece of software for the associate advisor. Because let's face it, at the end of the day, even if I'm trying to be in client meetings and to learn and absorb, my long-term outcomes are probably not really dictated by how effectively I could be like a physical stenographer of notes in a meeting. If the note taker can capture this more effectively, and then I look at its analysis and synthesize it and make sure it's really captured the right things, probably a higher and better use of the associate's time than just the stenography part. So I view that as an upgrade for the associate, not even necessarily an upgrade for the advisor, in the same way that as firms have built out depth, we went from calculators that advisors used in the client meeting to financial planning software that actually the advisor doesn't necessarily use as much, because that's also a fertile ground for us to learn and practice and get our proverbial repetitions in as an associate advisor coming up. So I think in the short term, there's a little confusion, there's a little muddling around this. I mean, the truth is for many advisory firms, they got into this to serve clients. They didn't get into this to train people. And they struggle a little with training, as many of us have had experiences going into firms. And if you give someone who's not inclined towards training a piece of software that says maybe you don't have to train as quite as quickly because this thing could like delay your next hire a little bit, I think there's a short term gut impulse response to go there. But I think what you're going to find in the longer term is, I mean, look, these are businesses where humans provide services to humans. The only firms that survive in the long run are the ones that have a pipeline of talent coming in that they're training and developing. It's utterly necessary for long-term survival. And if you're bringing talent in and developing it, why would you not give talent the latest tools? It just lets them be more effective in learning the parts that matter, how to sit in a meeting, observe the important stuff, including the non-spoken verbal stuff, get it captured into a compliance note, get it captured in the right takeaways, get a really good high quality email out to the client, and not grade you by the quality of your stenography in real time.
Very well put. And on that note, knowing how to effectively communicate, build personal connections to ultimately build trust is a very important part of being a financial planner. For newer planners that have tools to help them with the note-taking piece, how can they leverage the very human element of our job and build their skill set there?
So the short and challenging answer I would really give is you have to be willing and ready to put your neck out a little and put yourself into some slightly uncomfortable situations. And I say that simply to make the point that, look, I remember when I was early days getting started as an advisor as well, like the first time I was in a meeting and the senior advisor that I was supporting, his name was John, like John turned to me and was like, Michael, would you like to explain the Roth conversion analysis to the client? I was like, nope, really don't want to. Would rather not talk, feeling very intimidated, imposter syndrome just like cropping up all over the place here. This client has a lot of money and I'm freaking terrified. Right, like I didn't want to do it. It's like new scary learning change things in front of a client without like on a high wire without a net. Like it's scary. And if you don't get the reps in, learning doesn't happen. Right? You have to do the thing. There's no substitute for doing the thing. There's particularly no AI substitute, unfortunately, for doing the thing. Like I cannot send an AI bot to the gym to lift weights for me. Like it can physically move the weight back and forth, but I don't get stronger at the end. No positive outcomes happen. The point was not literally to move the weight from A to B. The point is I'm exercising my muscle when I lift the weight up and down. And similar phenomenon happens in what we're doing in advisory firms. So if I'm an advisor, that means if I'm trying to figure out how do I train and craft these skills, at the least it's step into the admittedly probably scary for most of us conversation of, oh gosh, he or she's going to call on me to say the thing, explain the thing to the client. Like, okay, am I there? Am I ready? Can I do this? What preparation do I need to do the days or week or night before or morning of to feel like I'm prepared in that moment? And ideally, because unfortunately not all of us are in firms where lead advisors will hand us those opportunities. It means if you're not getting handed that opportunity, it means you're asking for it. It means you're going to a lead advisor and saying, I've done 17 Roth conversion analyses. I've been practicing them. I think I'm getting better at explaining them. When we have the Smith meeting next week, can I talk through the Roth conversion analysis? Can I just do like that one part? I don't need to do the whole meeting. That's scary. Like, but can I do that one part of the meeting? And if that goes well, I'm going to do another one and another one. And then at some point, I'll deliver 30 Roth conversion analyses for clients. And now I'm getting some practice reps in, and I can expand that over time. I'm when I was doing that in my early days, I formed like a mini specialization in annuities. This was 20 years ago when a bunch of like the annuities with the first generation of the fancy income riders and withdrawal riders were coming out, and nobody quite understood how they all worked. I was like, okay, the firm is interested. Nobody quite knows how it works. So I'll be that person. So I read all the material and I read all the prospectuses and I learned all the stuff. And then when we needed to do this with a client, I said, like, can I be the one to talk the client through? And they said, sure, go for it, because we don't actually want to have to go through all the reading things anyway. Sure, I was saving them time and making their lives a little bit easier, so they gave me a shot. And then that became my thing, and I got good at it. And then suddenly I was getting invited into client meetings, even from other lead advisors, because they heard, oh, Michael's actually pretty good at explaining the annuity thing, and he does all like the contract provisions and the rest. And then you don't have to do that much prep work for yourself as the lead advisor because it's busy and there's a lot of things to do. And I made myself invaluable to multiple senior advisors, and suddenly I'm in more client meetings and getting even more repetitions.
Yeah, it's clear being proactive with asking for more opportunities, more responsibilities is important to gaining that experience.
Which again, I know is scary for a lot of us because it can feel scary to be in that position, and clients are staring at you and you're supposed to have all the answers and do all the things. You don't want to screw this up, and your boss is like right there next to you trying to look good in front of him or her as well. I mean, it is a high stakes and stressful situation. Like I don't want to diminish or belittle that at all. And part of growth is figuring out how to put us in situations that have some of those challenges and figuring out how to navigate through them successfully.
Yeah. So last question on this, with AI and more students going to study financial planning, the CFP numbers are going up. How does a new advisor stand out in a more competitive field?
So I guess let me ask, in what context is that? Is that like hiring to get the job, or when I'm in the firm and I'm trying to get noticed, do things, move up?
Can you answer on both sides?
Oh, sure. Okay. Fair enough. Dug that hole for myself. On the hiring end, so we see a lot of this, of the many hats I wear. I'm a partner in a business called New Planner Recruiting with Caleb Brown, where we hire folks in their first 5 years into financial planning jobs. That's what we do. That's all we do. It's called New Planner Recruiting for a reason. Like that's the gig. That's the focus. So there are things we see that show up well in that context. Number one, I would say out of the gate is, if at all possible, finishing your CFP coursework. If that's something you're doing as part of your career track coming in. I know some of us get started after we're in, but if you're coming to this as a student, getting your CFP coursework done in advance and sitting for the exam. And I see a lot of folks that wait. What's the point? I can't use it for 2 or 3 years anyways, because I got to wait on the experience requirement no matter what. But if you're going to a firm that is serious about financial planning, it is almost certain that their long-term requirement to be a senior advisor at the firm is that you're going to have your CFP marks. And the number one fear of any firm that's hiring is we bring you on, we put time and energy into you, we train you and develop you, and then you don't stay in the long run. Now, to some extent, that just there is for any firm that's hiring, and we have lives and things happen and change and circumstances change, and sometimes we leave. That's fine. But if I've got an unequivocal requirement for CFP marks, it's one thing if I hire you on, develop you at the firm, it goes great for a few years, and then you meet a boy or girl that's from a place and you decide to go to that place and you're not going to be here anymore, and we separate and part ways because stuff happens. It's a whole other matter when I hire you in and put time into you, and then it turns out that you can't pass the CFP exam. And I'm looking back and saying, well, that was quote unquote wasted, because I can't move you up if you can't pass the CFP exam and be a CFP in a firm that requires CFP. So from the hiring end, from the firm end, when you pass that exam, you massively de-risk me as a hiring firm. Anyone, and if I'm looking at any two candidates who are equally good, and one I've got to look and say, I don't know if he or she's going to pass the exam in the future. Don't have any reason to believe not, but it's an uncertainty. And the other one, that box is already checked. So I know it is literally just a matter of do the things at our firm for 2 years and you will have the marks. I'm always going to default to the second one because you've de-risked my process. I know you're going to get the marks. I just have to do the experience and the training. And that's what we're doing in hiring you. So get the education and sit for the exam, if at all possible. It really does make a difference in de-risking the firm. I think number two, I would say, is any training experience you can get in industry software. Go take the trainings from eMoney or Money Guide or Right Capital. Take them in Redtail or Wealthbox. Planning software and CRM is probably the big two in that regard. You can do the portfolio management end as well, but for a lot of firms, if they have a specialized associate role, you're more likely to live in CRM planning than doing like investment trading stuff. It doesn't even matter if you end up picking the software that we use in our firm. It's cool if you do, like, oh my gosh, you did the what Wealthbox training. We use Wealthbox. But if the reality is you did Wealthbox training, you've learned how CRMs work and how to navigate them, and we use Redtail, you're going to figure it out in a couple of minutes. I mean, the basic gist of how the CRMs work is not that different across them. Where do the clicky click buttons go? You figure out very quickly. So anything that is industry software experience tends to help for two reasons. At best, you just actually literally have some skills in the software or analogous software that we use. So you self-trained a little bit more. I don't have to train you quite as much. Every incremental bit helps. The second thing for a lot of firms we like to see is it shows some level of proactivity. You are interested enough in the industry and this job and these opportunities that you are willing to pursue some training and put a little bit into yourself to try to show well for the job. The third thing I think I'll probably highlight for the hiring process is how confidently you can communicate in interviews. Now, this is hard for some of us, depending on our context, because we may get nervous in interviews and strangers and all the things. But the reality for virtually any advisor that is interviewing you for an associate advisor role, the number one question in their head is, X years from now, can I see this person actually handling a bunch of our firm's clients? I mean, that the whole process is because at the end of the day, they're trying to figure out, are you going to be a lead advisor someday at this firm? Because if you're not, I'd rather hire someone else that I think could be a lead advisor. And my number one question when I'm thinking about can you be a lead advisor is ultimately not your technical skills. You need them because I need to know you're not going to get a suit along the way. Like you do need them. So I care about CFP education. I care about CFP exam. But when I'm really trying to figure out, okay, are you going to be able to be in front of a client someday? I'm literally envisioning, okay, if there's anything awkward about this conversation, then it's going to be awkwarder with clients. And that doesn't go well if they're paying us a lot of money and the conversation doesn't feel comfortable. So, whatever you can do to make those conversations comfortable. Now, this varies a lot by your background and your style and your upbringing. So, to each their own. This could be everything from I've seen people go through programs like Toastmasters to learn how to get comfortable in a room, introducing themselves, making small talk, giving a small speech, including especially sometimes if we're introverts and that is not our natural style. For others, we get confident when we have the knowledge. So do your homework before the interview. Look the firm up, pull their website, pull their Form ADV and look them up regulatorily and try to learn more about the firm. Interviewers and folks at firms can very quickly tell that you've actually done a bit of homework. Often it just gives a better conversation because you actually have things to talk about. You're not kind of like feeling around blindly, trying to figure out what we're discussing, and may come with more confidence. And for many, although not all firms, it's sort of appreciated and a sign of respect and seriousness about your interest in the role that you're willing to take a little bit of time to do that. Because I can tell you, interviewing a lot of people don't do that. I've had people I interviewed that couldn't remember which job we were that they applied for because they're applying for lots of things and lose track of them. So, on the interview end, we'll see that full range. So when you show up well prepared and I know about the firm and I know what they're focusing on, and I've got some reasonably intelligent questions that shows I've done my homework and been paying attention, I'm like, oh, okay, this is someone who takes an interest in what we're doing. Well, then I'm more interested in taking interest in them and what they're doing and the possibility that they could be with our firm someday. That's what I would look at on the hiring side. It's pass the CFP exam if we can. It's software training. It shows initiative, and maybe you just make my training burden a little bit easier as I'm envisioning you coming on board. And it is whatever you have to do that works for you to get you a little bit more comfortable and confident in conversations. Some of us are great at small talk. Some of us are not. I'm terrible at it. I'm a raging introvert, and that's hard for me. But finding some ways to be able to have the conversation confidently so that you can have a good conversation in interaction.
Great insight to see from the hiring perspective how you can differentiate yourself. Once you already have that job internally, how do you see leveraging your time, leveraging your capacity, leveraging your knowledge to help the firm and differentiate yourself to get further within your profession?
tips or things that I would suggest here. So we do a lot of research on Kitces.com around what makes advisors successful, what are predictors of outcomes of career success. And one of the most striking things to us is one of the single greatest predictors of long-term career success as an advisor, and literally like how high your income and success climbs, is the number of years of client-facing experience that you have. Like literally raw count of years. Because there's just a sheer effect of, again, if you think of it like building a muscle, getting the reps in, the earlier you start and the more reps you get in, the longer you have to compound that out to positive outcomes. And some of that is building actual communication skills, some of that is building confidence, some of that is building knowledge, some of that is building the pattern recognition of how clients show up, some of that is practicing hard conversations with clients, some of that is eventually you just get known in your community and your peer groups that you're an advisor. Early on they're like, you're lovely, but I don't really know if you're going to stick around for a long time, so I'm not really ready to work with you yet. And after a couple of years, like, you've really stuck around, like you must know your stuff. All right, I'm ready to reach out and work with you now. All of that compounds with time. And so then what I think about from the advisor end is essentially how quickly can I get some level of client facing experience, which in the simplest sense is how do I get into the meeting room where the advisor is? That's my goal. That's my goal. Now, from the firm end, as we noted at the start of this conversation, a lot of firms are now looking and saying, well, I don't know why I need you in the meeting. I have a note taker. The question then very practically becomes, as that associate, as that paraplanner, how can I make myself useful enough that that senior advisor wants me in the room? Hey, can I come into the client meeting and help you review all the AI note taker stuff so that you don't need to worry about that and I can save you some time? Because you still have to spend like 10 or 20 minutes reviewing all the notes when they come out. Could I do that for you? Now, in order to review the notes when you come out, I have to be in the meeting, make sure that it captures all the things that were said. So if you let me into the meeting, I'll save you the 10 or 20 minutes of prep after the meeting. It's not as great as saving you 30 minutes of typing it out because we're just reviewing the note taker, but I can still save you some time. Hey, and I could review the email that gets drafted as well and make sure that that's prepped and ready to go. And I'll do the follow up because for some of the note takers, it prompts the things, but it doesn't literally create action items into the CRM. So let me create all the action items. I'll make sure the right things get done and assigned out to the right people with the right due dates so the client gets sharp and fast follow up. Could I do that for you? I need to be in the meeting so I know all the stuff that's discussed so that I can support you there, but I will save you time and that would be helpful to you, so you should want me in the meeting in order to do that. Right now I'm building a reason to be in the meeting that makes that senior advisor want to pull me in the meeting. So maybe I'm helping with meeting notes, follow-up email, follow-up tasks. Maybe it's something I'm trying to do to get into the meeting. So as I mentioned earlier, the version of this that I did was I looked at something that crops up often in the firm. At the time, it was how to use certain guaranteed living benefit riders on annuities and said, I'm going to become the firm's leading expert in this. It wasn't that hard. We used like 3 contracts. So I read all 3 and then I read them again in a third time and I learned them really well. And then I took a meeting or two at the wholesaler. So I really knew how they all worked. And, if you have a very focused domain, it doesn't actually take that long to become a leading expert in it. If the pond is small enough, you can be a big fish really fast. So I found something that came up very frequently for the firm. I focused in and became an expert in it. Took weeks because there weren't that many permutations, but now I'm the internal expert on the thing. And so then I could go around and say, hey, can I help do the analysis for the clients on whether they're a fit for the contract and whether we should do the Scudder contract or the Prudential contract. I'd love to actually be in the meeting. I've got a good way that I actually explained this to clients that John found really helpful. Dan, I'd love to do it for your clients as well. And so now I'm finding my way at opportunities to make myself useful in the meeting. And, I talked for like 3 minutes. I mean, this was a very small part of a big meeting, but if I had 3 minutes to say in the meeting, I had an excuse to be in all of the meeting. And now I'm getting my client experience, my time, my facing, my reps in. Now, again, going with this, we said earlier, whatever else it takes for you to find your confidence and comfort to speak up in those meetings. I know for a few of us, we're just all in there. It's totally fine. We flow naturally through crowds. For some of us, this is much harder. So, whatever it is that it takes for you to find that comfort, maybe it's practice and role play. Ask a colleague, ask a friend, ask a significant other, whatever it takes to literally practice the conversations. Maybe it's a fear of crowds thing, and programs like Toastmasters helps. Improv comedy is actually remarkably good training for this. True improv groups are actually it's not about the funny part, it's about the improv part. And the improv part is simply about how to be aware and authentic in moments and not get stuck in your head, over focusing on the things in your head and then losing the thread of conversation and showing up too timidly. So even things like improv classes, even if you don't want to be funny and don't need to be funny, are actually quite effective at helping to practice those skills. Me personally, I'm like, I couldn't speak in the meeting unless I knew the stuff. I had to know all my stuff cold. For me, like the confidence came from the knowledge, which is, if you want to know how unconfident I was, look at how many letters are after my name. Direct inverse relationship there. Lot of letters, big hole for me to dig out of. But that was what did it for me. So that's not true for everyone. I don't want to prescribe lots of letters after your name for everyone. But whatever it is that it takes for you to get confident, to be willing, ready to speak up in meetings, and then finding what can I do to be useful enough for a senior advisor that I am saving them time and making their life easier, and they want me in that meeting to make that happen.
Yeah, the best way to build job security is to make your boss's life easier.
Yes,
Absolutely.
it's kind of joking and really true.
Yeah, exactly. So progressing down the timeline, let's say you've got 5 years under your belt. You're starting to
Okay.
think, man, I could be a partner here. But
Hmm.
now we've got these mega firms backed by
Yeah.
PE that are gobbling up firms left and right, and multiples are going higher.
Mhm.
How should these advisors be looking at their path to partnership?
So I'd frame this a few different ways. First, I mean, just to put some context overall, yes, PE has bought and gobbled up a lot of firms, and there's a ridiculously long tail of small to mid-sized firms that, the last number I see is like after all the PE activity, now it might only be about 92% of firms that aren't owned by PE. Now, to be fair, it used to be 100% that weren't because we didn't really have PE in our lives until about 10 years ago. But by most measures, I mean, maybe they have 5 to 10% share of all the firms that are out there. There's a lot. I mean, we see this in XY Planning Network. We launched more than 300 RAs from scratch last year, and there weren't 300 M&A deals last year. So like just XYPN created more firms than all the acquisitions combined. And in the aggregate, the industry is creating firms even faster than the PE firms can buy them. Now, granted, PE firms buy slightly larger firms, new firms start small, so there's a little like replenishment cycle thing that's playing out. But there's lots and lots of firms out there that are not PE owned or on a PE track. And there's also a subset of firms that have some very intentional goals to not be PE owned and actually want to create longer term internal succession plans or employee ownership structures. So first is if that's important to you, understanding what the firm's goals are and just asking like what are the long term goals of the firm. Are you founder owned? Do you intend to always be founder owned? Do you intend to be team owned someday? Are you looking to introduce partners? Is there anyone around here who's already become a partner as you look around? None of those are definitive confirming answers, right? Owners can change their minds. Sometimes life and circumstances change. Sometimes we're truly not sure in the owner's seats. I'm like, I don't know. The truth is, I don't really know what I'm going to want to do 10 years from now. So I'm going to live my life for the next 7 or 8 years, and then I'm going to make a decision about what I want to do with my firm in 10 years. So they may not know, but they're fair questions, and there are lots and lots of firms that don't want to be there, that don't want to be in a PE world. The second thing to note, even in a PE world, is PE not always, but often actually includes equity as a part of the deal to retain people when your firm gets acquired. So if you had an interest in getting a little slice of equity, that actually becomes the entree for a lot of people. That's not bad news. That may be good news if you wanted to get your your first slice of ownership and some opportunity to participate in upside when a transaction happens. So even custom folks, it's not always bad news. There are industries out there where the PE playbook is basically come in, buy the thing, slash and burn as many expenses as possible, and then run like a super profitable, slimmed down core. That's not how it works in our industry. Like it's just not. It's a people business, a service business, and the single thing that PE firms are most terrified about whenever they acquire a firm is whether you, the advisor, are going to stay. So like you're afraid they're going to fire you and they're afraid that you're going to leave them. Like we have this weird mutual fear that we both think the other person's going to do the thing when really we just all want to stay together here. So just recognize it doesn't have to all be bad news there. There are some differences in culture and environment that sometimes come forth. So some people like that, some people don't. But it's not all bad news necessarily from an equity perspective. Uh, to come back to your question, Mike, a little bit more directly though, around just the dynamics of I'm moving up and I have interest in equity someday. So there are a couple of things I would encourage or counsel in this end. The first is uh, the best way to buy a big piece of the firm in the long run is to buy a small piece of the firm as soon as you can. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean right away because there's still going to be a timeline and there may be requirements and expectations. But I see a lot of folks that are coming in that will say something to the effect of, I hope somebody to buy the whole firm out. I want to own the majority. I want to own 100% of the firm. The math is hard, especially if you're trying to buy 100% all at once. The best case scenario is you will take out the most debt you have ever imagined in your life, depending on the size of the firm. That may be many multiples the size of your mortgage or your house or all of that combined. But if you can buy a small piece sooner rather than later, a couple of years from now, you're paying down the debt on the small piece, which often we can handle from cash flow. Now it's profitable. Now you have your income and your savings plus the profits from the piece that you bought to buy the next one. And then you get a little bit more. And then a few years later, you've got the dollars from the first and the second piece to buy a third piece. And if you kind of think of it like, the snowball method, rolling down the hill and getting bigger as it goes, the truth is that's really how most internal successions happen financially successfully. We tend to frame it as, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Senior Advisor, you tell me when it is you're leaving in 3 or 5 or 7 years, and then we'll build up to the event where 7 years from now we do the deal and I stroke the deck and we get the financing and we try to do all the stuff. And it's really hard to make the math work. You can get close, but it's often slightly cash flow negative for the first year or two. And a slightly cash flow negative on a really big purchase number is really cash flow negative relative to your income, which makes it easy for a PE firm with $1 bajillion and very hard for us individually. So don't think buy all at once. Think buying in tranches and doing often at least 2, frequently 3 tranches to get there. And I've seen some that'll even do 4. And the tranches are probably spaced 3 years apart, maybe even a little bit more. So this could be, not 9 to 15 years, depending on quite how many is and how you space them out, which all the more means that at least we're trying to get to a tranche sooner rather than later to start the process. The second part of this that I will highlight, a little bit of kind hard medicine for folks that are listening. So if I'm a firm owner, and I'm thinking about introducing a partner, expanding, sharing equity. The reality is, as of today, I own all the equity and I get all the profits. And there's really no reason for me to do anything where tomorrow I'm going to have less than today. Just doesn't really feel good. This is why equity is generally not like gifted or just handed out. At best, maybe I'm trading my income in the future for these shares for like the check that you write me when you purchase it. But even then, I really have very little incentive to sell shares in a firm so that you can buy more later when I can just hold onto all of them for 3, 5, or 7 or 10 years. And then whenever I feel like it, I call a PE firm and they drop out of the sky with a wheelbarrow of cash and buy it out for fair market value. So what does it take to get me as a firm owner to be willing to let go of equity and share it? And the answer very simply is when the pie will be bigger with us together than it is on its own, which is a nice way of saying this really frequently comes down to some version of business development and generating revenue and clients. It's not a negative for being an amazing advisor who wonderfully serves the clients of the firm and does all of the great things that clients feel well served and retained and pay the fees that makes the firm financially successful and profitable. But serving clients is typically a salary job, hopefully a pretty good one, because it is very valuable. Equity tends to come when I, as the owner or founder, can look and say, if we own this together and we're both contributing to the growth, the thing will be bigger, which means I will own a smaller piece of a bigger pie and I still come out ahead, which makes you want to do it. And then you own the rest of that pie and you're coming out ahead as well. And now we're all winning. So at the least, firms have to be growing for this to ever be possible. And it's notable because a lot of firms really are not. If the firm is not growing, then now really every dollar of equity that leaves my hands just takes me straight backwards as a firm owner. And that isn't terribly appealing and doesn't feel good unless I'm just ready to be done and I want someone to transact and take this off my hands. If the firm is growing, we've got at least some opportunity, but it doesn't feel great as a founder to say, so here's the deal, I'm going to grow it and then your shares will get more valuable while I grow it. What feels good is, how about you become a partner because you've been growing the business? And I believe if we share as partners, we'll both grow the business and our combined efforts will be larger than what this ever could have been for either of us individually. And now we are both have smaller pieces of a bigger pie and everybody finishes ahead. I often think about career progression for advisors as kind of this multi-tier journey. Like step one, stage one, I've got to learn my technical stuff. Right. I need it to be an effective paraplanner associate. More practically, no one's going to let me sit first chair with clients in the future if they're wondering, like, but I don't know if the words that come out of his mouth are going to get a suit out of oblivion at some point. So like I have to be technically competent or I'm like a walking ticking time bomb for the firm. Necessary but not sufficient. Right. As we said earlier, then if the question becomes, well, what does it take to be successful in having clients? The answer is I have to be able to communicate with them effectively and manage relationships. Keep them on board and serve them well. Which is why even from day one when I'm interviewing you, I'm looking at how you show up in the interview. I'm trying to figure out 3, 5, 7 years from now, could I actually see you with firm clients that you're handling entirely on your own? So then I got to practice the communication skills and the rapport skills and the trust building skills and all the things it takes to deliver the advice well, manage the relationship and keep them on board and feeling served well. That's like step 2. Step 3 is, and then I go figure out how to develop business and bring in clients. And that's when I go from a very financially successful employee to someone that typically gets an opportunity or at least can make a case for an opportunity for participating in equity. And it's a whole different skill set to learn. You know, serving clients well is different than going to get new ones. As with all the preceding steps, it takes time, it takes repetitions, it takes learning, it takes getting your backside kicked for a while where it doesn't go well, so we can all learn for ourselves not to touch stoves that are hot. Right? There's really no substitute for it. A few people come along and happen to have a natural gift for one of these, so they jump through a stage quickly. Historically, the industry liked to start with the sales part and then got to all the relationships and the technical knowledge later. So, you know, any founders who've been in 25 plus years, they just screen for sales, business development up front. If you didn't have that, you didn't get to come in. Now we've kind of flipped that around in a way that I think is much better for the profession. Not everyone needs to be a business developer to have a successful career. Not every client needs a business developer to be served well. They just need a person who's good and knowledgeable about advice and can deliver it effectively. So I think our model is much, much better than what the industry's was in the past, how that career path has evolved. But there really is a tiering and layering. When you go from the technical knowledge, the ability to handle clients, there's a big income jump. Right? Associate advisors can do well, but you unlock a whole next tier of earning potential when you can actually manage the client relationships autonomously. And then ultimately that too has some ceiling, and the unlock to the next level. If you want to do it, you don't have to. You can make a pretty darn good living being that lead service advisor. If you want to get to the next level, it really becomes about how will you learn business development, whatever that means for you. Some of us, do content creation, some of us do social media, some of us do networking, some of us build referrals, some of us build center of influence relationships. There's a zillion things under the sun. Anything can work if it works for you. But that really is where the equity doors open up. And when I see firms that are struggling with this, there are exceptions. Sometimes certain founders just really have trouble letting go, and that does crop up. But most often when I see equity problems, it's some combination of either the firm and the aggregate just isn't growing. So any sharing of equity feels like a net loss for the people who already own it. That's not how good deals get done. Good deals get done when everybody feels like they'll own a smaller piece of a bigger pie. So either the firm isn't growing at all, or the growth is so entirely led by the founder and current equity owners. They're just looking and saying, like, why would I transition equity to make your equity more valuable when I'm the one that's growing it? I want one where we grow it together and then we do better together.
Thank you for expanding
Yeah.
upon the growth trajectory through advisory as a
Yeah.
profession, and then also like the considerations that the existing partners make whenever they want to let in new partners. On the flip side of being in your starting years as an advisor
Mhm.
and determining, is this a place I want to be a partner? Is this a place I want to move through the tiers in? How would you recommend newer planners go through the process of determining if their current firm is a good fit or if there is potentially a better fit out there?
Yeah. Um, so it depends a little bit where we are in the progression stage. In the first year or two or three, I find almost anything is pretty good experience as long as they do some reasonable semblance of financial planning and they're reasonably constructive human beings to work with, right? They're not mean and nasty and just highly unpleasant that you're going home miserable and stressed. Like reasonable human beings and they're doing planning things. I'm getting early skill experience and repetitions in. Even if it's not the version I want to do in the long run, anything is great experience when we're getting started, when we're getting going initially. Um, if we don't feel like it's the long-term fit, we'll make some transition after 2 or 3 years. Hopefully find it there. If not, I find most advisors actually the super long-term firm tends to be the third one that they're at, not the first. First, I did a thing. I didn't even know what questions to ask or not ask really, and how to interpret the answers. They seemed nice enough. Off we went. I did that for a few years. I learned some things I like. I learned some things I don't like. I go to a second firm. The second firm's like the polar opposite of the first, right? If it was a big firm, I go to a really small one. If it was a small firm, I go to a really big one. Like whatever the, if it was too investment oriented, I go to planning. If it's too planning oriented, I go to investments. Like we just, we find the few things we dislike and we like course correct to the opposite extreme. Then you do that for a few years, maybe it lands. Usually we end up overcorrecting a little bit too far in the other direction. But by the time you get through the second stint, now I'm 4 to 7 years in, depending on how long my stints are. I'm through the technical phase. Hopefully, I'm feeling pretty good about the client relationship, and maybe I'm even starting to develop a little bit of business development skills if that's my inclination. I now really have a sense of what I like doing and what I don't like doing. Both which parts do I enjoy, right? I thought I liked the client stuff. Maybe I don't like it as much. I thought I'd like working with these clients. Actually, I did a brief stint for a little while where I was like nerding out on all the divorce planning stuff and really learning my divorce chops, and then discover like I just really don't like working with clients going through divorce. It's really contentious and stressful, and I take on the stress of people around me, and I did not enjoy that. Now I know some advisors like they crush at it. They're amazing. Like they are the, emotional ballast that holds their clients firm, and they love fighting the fight against the ex that we're going to put down, and like it's amazing for them, and more power to them. I found I didn't like those clients, so I don't serve them. Then I had to move away, but I wouldn't have known until I did it for a while and found out like, oh, this just actually doesn't feel good. So let me shift. So often we find by the third firm, or by the end of the second one, we're making a choice about the third. It's like, all right, I'm really ready to build my own client base now, and I need to find a home for the long term. and we pick that home. Maybe we stay where the second is, maybe we go to the third. A lot of people hang their own shingle there. We see a lot of that at XY Planning Network, and we make our decision. So, Allison, kind of getting back to your question. So my stage one is just, are they doing planning things in reasonable human beings? And I should get some decent chance to get opportunities. The third slightly relevant question there is, and are they growing? Do they have some growth rates of, call it, at least about 10 to 15%? A firm that's growing at 15%, right, if I remember his good old rule of 72, at 15%, it takes about 5 years to double. So if a firm is growing at 15%, it doubles every 5 years, which means however many advisors it has, it needs twice as many of them 5 years from now. So if it's going to take me 3 or 4 years to really learn my stuff, get confident, and then raise my hand and say, like, so what's my next raise opportunity to move up? They'll be like, oh, funny you asked. We've been realizing we need to add on a new elite advisor next year. How about you work towards that? Like, what an amazing coincidence. We're all lined up. When they're only growing at 5%, which is ultimately where a lot of firms are, when they're only growing at 5%, now I pull up my rule of 72, like, yeah, they're not going to need a new advisor for about 14 years. And I'm not waiting 14 years for a promotion. At that point, I'm basically just waiting for someone to leave or die. Doesn't feel good. If I'm hoping to last beyond the very first career stage, actually asking even in the initial interview process, like, what's the growth rate of the firm been over the past 3 years, is a good question. And if you hear a number south of 15, particularly south of 10, there are probably not going to be much of any opportunities for moving up within the firm, because they're just literally not growing and expanding the organizational chart enough for opportunities to emerge. Doesn't mean you won't get a good experience, but it means you almost certainly will find yourself ceilinged with nothing more interesting to move up into after 2 or 3 years, except then coming back to say, well, if you want to get your own clients, because if you'll grow yourself, you can do more here, but we're not growing, so we have nothing to feed you. And it's like, well, if I wanted to grow my own clients, I could, like, hang my own shingle. I didn't necessarily need you for that. When you get to sort of the second firm in this progression, or stage two, if your firm is growing enough that you get to grow and move up, now I find this starts to shift a little bit. Questions that crop up are around, what's the vision of the firm? I mean, where are they going? To Mike, to your question earlier, right? Is this my founder's 57 and says he wants out in 3 to 5 years, and he's just going to do the PE process when the time comes, and I'm going to go where it goes. Okay, well, that's one set of circumstances. Is it a 47-year-old who says, like, I got a 15-year horizon, and I think we can make this an amazing thing, and I'm really excited to expand the equity pool because I'd really like to see this continue as the firm exists with the great people we've have and the more that we're adding, and I want it to live beyond me, and I don't necessarily want to do one of those big sale exits. Okay, well, that's a different kind of environment. Do they want to stay fairly small and boutique? Do they want to become a huge, big national firm? Depending on your preference, that either sounds awesome or terrible. Either one, right? There's not a right or wrong answer. There's what's the vision of the firm? Like, where is this train going? And do I want to be on this train given where the train is going? That is the burden and obligation of founders and owners, to articulate where the train is going. And then it is your choice to decide whether you would like to be on said train. So get clear on what the vision is and where the firm is going. Sometimes firm owners don't entirely know, and just pushing them kindly but firmly for that answer. Hey, I'm trying to figure out if I want to be here in the long run, so I'd really like to know where you're taking it in the long run. It's a fair conversation to raise. The second thing often that I'm looking at that point is culture. What's it really like here working with the people that work here? Because if you're going to make a commitment at this point, you're going to be hanging out with them for like another 10 to 20 years if this is where you're going to build your client base and do your long-term thing. So, cultures can and do shift and evolve a little bit. But at the end of the day, like, does this feel like a good culture that I want to be in? Are these the colleagues that I want? Are these the potentially future partners that I want to be around or not? Here again, there's no right or wrong answer. Cultures vary widely from one firm to the next. And one person's culture dream is another person's culture nightmare, just based on style and preferences. But am I feeling good about the culture? And the third piece, again, I think I'm looking at is, are they growing? Firms that are not growing just tend to have some ceilings and limits. So if you're already feeling good where you are and you just want to hang out and have it be stable, that can be totally fine. slow growth firms tend to be super stable. If you've got further growthy aspirations, being in a firm that's not growing when you're a growthy person gets challenging, right? The flip side of the equity conversation earlier, if I'm a founder, I'm not excited to share with you when I'm doing all the growth and you're kind of tagging along. I want to see us grow together. But it feels equally not good from the other end when I'm like, I want to drive all the growth and do all this stuff. And the firm owners are just kind of like hanging out and in cruise mode because they're fairly close to retirement and they're not really hungry for growth anymore. I'm like, well, why would I grow I mean, I appreciate even the equity opportunity, but when I got 10% and you've got 90 and I'm doing most of the growth, that still doesn't feel good either. Like we should be growing together. Maybe it won't be a perfect percentage reflection, but at least if we're all moving in the same aligned direction and we've got a plan to transition equity over time, this can still feel pretty good for everyone. But if they've got no hunger for growth and you've got a hunger for growth, that's a mismatch as much as you don't want to be growing, want to hang out. They've got all these crazy national expansion plans. That means your life is going to change more than you want. So in the purest sense, Allison, to me, when you're getting to that second stage, like is this my long-term home? I think of it as a question of alignment. Am I aligned to the firm, their vision, their goals, their direction, their culture, the people who are there, the clients that we serve? Do I the planning philosophy, the investment philosophy? If it feels in alignment, it usually pretty quickly gets to, well, why would I not want to keep going here? Like I like the people, I like the firm, I like the culture, I like the philosophy, I like what we do, and I feel like we serve our clients well, and I've got the economic opportunities that work for me, whatever those are. When it feels in alignment, it's pretty straightforward. And frankly, I find way more often than not when I get these questions from folks who are trying to figure out if it's the right fit, the truth is they've already figured out it's not aligned, and that's why the question is coming up. And it's maybe just a little bit more of, I think you deep down you may have already realized it's not aligned. So maybe it's just time to start figuring out what would your version of the next step be? Because there are lots of choices, right? We've got different channels and different models and different affiliation structures and hang your own shingle and not hang your own shingle and big firms and small firms. And there's a lot of choices. So that can be a scary leap and maybe take some homework. But I find for a lot of folks, if you just, take a little bit of this introspection time and look deep down on what your gut's feeling, you probably actually have a pretty good sense already of whether the long-term alignment is there. But again, that's more the stage 2 decision. The stage 1, like, experienced reps with a reasonable planning firm and reasonable human beings is good enough to progress your career at that stage. You can make the super long-term decision later.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a wealth of knowledge, whether
Awesome.
you're a student or 0 to 5 years or you're aspiring to be a partner. We had something in there.
Awesome.
You just got all the answers. For the listeners, we gave no heads up on the questions we were asking Michael.
Yeah, this was
So
all blind. This was truly
all
blind.
blind, no softballs there, all hard balls or fastballs. And so we just want to say thank you so much. Any last parting thoughts for the listeners today?
The only other thing I would add overall is it's in the true sense that this is an amazing profession to be in. You get paid way above the median household wage in the US to sit around and give people good service and awesome advice and have them appreciate it. It's pretty freaking amazing. Yes, there's speed bumps and hard and stuff that crops up along the way because jobs are still jobs and humans are still human. But in a world where a lot of people are struggling with various combinations of finding jobs that will pay decently well, especially with like an AI driven uncertainty future, and finding jobs that have some meaning and purpose, which is vacant in a lot of employer situations these days. Like financial planning really truly checks both boxes. And as we've already seen, like 30 years of industry technology evolution, it's a career that's remarkably immune to technology innovation breakthroughs, leap throughs. We don't get displaced by the proverbial or actual robots. Humans have a need for trust and connection to other human beings. And I don't think anybody would say our lives have gotten simpler over 30 years of technology developments, and I don't unfortunately see that changing either. So it's a career that has robustness against technology meaning, purpose, helping and service to others, and actually pays well above average when you get to the experience levels. Like, come on in, stay a while. And remember at the same time, this career is a marathon, not a sprint. So all the amazing things happen with time, and it takes time for all the amazing things to happen. Make sure you're giving yourself a chance to run the race and stay in it for the long run.
Absolutely. Get your reps in as soon as possible. Thank you guys so much for listening. This has been the Blueprint and FPA NextGen podcast with the Michael Kitces. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.